Hey everyone, I'm Rambo. So I'm going to do a little live image review, some ocean and surf photography images that a few people have sent in. If you want to be part of something like this in the future, there's a website called Sony Sing, which Sony run, and it's something they do to, so there's events out there for the community. So often do little meetups here. Done a couple of ocean swims, some like workshops and stuff like that. But while everyone's stuck in their own countries or stuck in their own towns or not allowed to meet up, that kind of stuff, I've done a few little online things. So if you want to get in on the next one, or if you want to check out some other events, so this is the website here. You click on events, and mostly in Australia and New Zealand at the moment. Things like this you can do from anywhere, obviously, but you can check it out. Some are free, some you've got to pay for. Most of them are pretty cheap. Some really cool community stuff going on. It's a good chance to meet some other people. So yeah, check that out and get involved. So try to up my production values on this image review from last time. Last time was pretty crummy. I just used the headphone microphone and the webcam from my computer. So this time Sony actually just released a little update for their Imaging Edge webcam app. So what that means is now I'm using my actual Sony camera to do the webcam rather than the computer webcam. So it should look a little nicer, and got cool stuff like eye autofocus, little soft background, that kind of stuff. Sales pitch, here we go. Right on, so let's get into it. So we're going to do review a few little images that have been sent in here. The first one we have is from Chris King. So Chris from Norway, I think, which is pretty rad. I had no idea Norway had waves, but it looks like it's actually got really, really good waves. Looks like a cool place to go. So yeah, stoked to have Chris involved. I've seen a few of his photos around, actually. He's shot some great images, so stoked he's seen a few in. So we'll start off on this first one here. So Chris has sent me both his edited JPEGs and the RAWs, which is great because you can kind of see how it was before, and we can maybe do a few little tweaks as well, put our own spin on things. So this is a really, really cool shot. So just check out. So up here, up the top, under your histogram, you can see information about the camera settings it was shot. So we've got ISO 400, shot at 50mm, f9, and 1/500th of a second. So this is epic positioning from Chris on this one. If it's shot with a 50mm, he's like right super intimate on this slabby wave. So he's got right up in there. So yeah, it's positioning on this is amazing. He's done really, really well. When I first looked at it, I thought it was probably potentially like a longer lens shot, like like a 90mm, or I often shoot like 70-200. So I'm probably a little bit further back from the action than Chris. So good on him for getting right up in there. So yeah, props on his composition here. It looks really, really cool. His positioning's great. He's done a great job there. I shot this with a 6300, I think. So awesome little Sony cam. So as far as the settings go, there's obviously not a whole heap of light, which is the reason that Chris has gone to ISO 400, and then he's got the shutter speed at 1/500th, which I guess is so he doesn't have to push his ISO so high. But when you're quite close to a wave like this, you'll see, if you imagine, I guess, how quickly a piece of water is going to move from one side of the frame to the other. The further away you are from a wave, the slower it's going to move through the frame. The closer you are to a wave, sort of the faster it's going to move through your frame. And so the closer you are to a wave, sort of the faster your shutter speed needs to be. So if I was shooting fisheye, for example, and you're like really, really close right up in there, then I would be looking at shooting like 1500. In this instance, probably I probably would have leaned more toward 1/1000th. Obviously, it's going to mean his ISO is going to bump up a little bit, but he's at f9, and shooting with the A6300, your depth of field is going to be a little bit better because it's a crop sensor. So f9 on the A6300 is probably like about f11 on like a full frame camera, like the A7 III, etc. So it'd be equivalent of that. So he could probably have dropped the aperture down a little bit, maybe if he shot that at like f8 or f7.1, then the shutter speed could have come up to 1,000th, or the other option would have been to boost that ISO up. Because what happens is we've got this, like this bit of the wave here is like super crisp, it looks amazing. His focus is bang on and everything. But when you get up to the lip of the wave where the bit is moving quite a lot faster, there's like a little bit of motion blur in there. So it might also be like slight focus as well, because it's more focused down here. But yeah, I think if that shutter speed was just a little bit quicker, that might have been like slightly crisper in that faster moving part of the wave. Other than that, it's amazing photo. So we have a look at the raw. That's the raw there, and then that's the edit. His edit's really nice. I probably we could maybe do a quick edit and see if there's anything we could do differently there. So first thing, I'll do the same as what Chris did. He just gave it a little bit of a straighten. I mean, that's pretty straight, all things considered. When you're that close to the back zone, last thing you're looking at is the horizon. So yeah, first thing I do is just kind of get my exposure overall where I want it to be. So I would even go like a little bit, especially if it's sort of flat like this, I'd go like a little bit up. And then from there, you can throw like a little bit of extra contrast at it. So I'm just moving the contrast slider around, moving that up a little bit. And then when it's flat light, I feel like an image benefits a lot from having blacks into it. So if you hold down what do we hold down? The Option key on a Mac or on a PC. Geez, I'm not too sure. Probably something pretty similar. And then if you move the blacks down, you'll see it's all white. And then eventually you get little bits coming into the image. So anything that's coming in colored, that means that you've lost the information because you've pushed the blacks too far. So that's just, there's no sort of shadow information. It's just like 100% black there. So you don't want to push it that far. You can bring it back up a little bit until, it doesn't really bother me if we're losing stuff from the background, but I don't really want to lose too much info out of the wave. So we'll go like that just till we just start. So then you can see you get a little bit more contrast like that. And then you can do the same thing with the whites. So bring the whites up. So we're still moving the whites up. So, and then we're losing information out of the sky, but to be honest, there's like not much in this going on in the sky anyway. So I'm not really too fussed if we lose that. And I almost feel like if it's like a little bit cloudy day, just losing the sky, 100% blowing out the sky and just having like it looks almost like a cleaner image because there's no sort of distractions or anything. So I would kind of keep going up. I actually don't usually hold this little Option key down to look, but it's a good guide. I usually will just do it by eye. So we'll do it. We'll keep moving it up. And then, here. Oh, I think I've totally confused myself. Sorry. I think that's Chris's actual final image. That was one I was messing with before. There we go. Now I'm sorry. I'm just going to start again. So I was actually messing with Chris's JPEGs. I was wondering why things were looking a bit weird. So we'll just do that real quick. Those same sort of things I just did there. Let's bring up the exposure a little bit. Get the blacks. Bring in some blacks. Bring up the whites. So there's probably a bit much black in there. Throw a little bit more contrast at it. And I like what Chris has done. He's sort of got like a slightly like bluer tinge going on. So yeah, to achieve something like that, you just bring the temperature down. That's at 55750. So that's kind of like a standard cloudy day sort of auto white balance. But if you bring it down a tad, then you'll get like a little bit sort of a bluer tone going on. And then I'll probably bring the exposure up a little bit more. And then highlights is usually something I would bring down, but when there's with the sky, I think it looks kind of nice if the sky's just white. It just kind of makes like a cleaner image. There's no distractions going on in the sky. You can just concentrate on what's going on with the wave. And then probably a cloudy day image, you always want to throw like a little bit of extra saturation at it just to get that sort of more lifelike color going on, because a cloudy day always seems to dull things down a little bit. So I'm just bringing that saturation up, slider up slightly. I think that looks pretty nice. Maybe bring the temperature down a little bit bluer. So if you've got like green in your wave, and you wanted to, say you decided that you didn't want to have like so much green looking wave, you wanted to have the wave be more like a blue look, you can just do the opposite. So with the tint slider, you can go away from the green and go closer into the red, and then that will just sort of take that green sort of tinge out. And then if you go too far, it's obviously going to end up like purple, but so we don't want that. But you can just, often you can just bump that up a teeny little bit, and then that just sort of will take that green tinge out. And then what's happened is down the bottom half of the wave is quite a lot lighter than the top half. So I'll just even that out by doing a gradient. So if we click up top here to, what do we actually call this thing? It's not throwing. Graduated filter, that's the guy. Graduated filter, we click that. If we double click on effect, it just zeroes out what we've done before. So I'll just bring the exposure down slightly. I'm going to bring it down minus 3.0. I'm going to bring the highlights down a little bit. And then we just drag that from the bottom, and then find that just sort of evens up our total exposure a little bit more on the wave. And so then now I've done that, the wave kind of looks a little bit, overall looks a little bit dark. So we just bring the exposure up a tiny little bit. So what we did is we just kind of evened everything up. Throw a little bit more contrast in there. Maybe slightly more blacks, a little bit more satchy. All right, so I mean, doesn't look too dissimilar to what Chris did, so we're on the same page there. All right, I really like that image, but we'll move it along. So it looks like Norway's got some pretty sick slabs. So this is Chris's raw there, and that's his edit. So he's been pretty light-handed on the edit, which is nice. Just kind of straightened it, and it looks like he's added a little bit more contrast. Again, it's sort of a cloudier day. So generally, if it's cloudy, I'm just going to work on Chris's edited one here. If it's cloudy, I generally add just like a little bit more color in it. So, I mean, a good way to know when to stop is to keep going, and then when it looks a little bit too intense, then I'll probably start bringing it down a little bit. As far as composition goes, I love how he's got the rocks in here. You know, it really gives it that feeling of that how close the rocks this place is breaking. He's shot this with a 50mm, so it's got zero compression. Like, it's just, as you can see it with your eye, is as it is. So yeah, this wave obviously breaks really, really close to the rocks. I'm finding this little bit of whitewash that's bouncing up here, like a little bit niggly. It's a little bit distracting. So, and then it's also, we're not really seeing so much of the bottom of the wave. And I find if Chris was maybe just like a little bit higher, if he was standing up on these rocks here, still getting like a bit of rock foreground, but I feel like he'd be a little bit higher and just eliminate out this, you know, the whitewash bounce, and you see maybe a little bit more of the wave. And then it would also, the wave would fill up more of the frame. So the higher you go, the more sort of wave you'd see in the frame. So there'd be like a little bit more wave and a little less sky. Trying to work out what that little, this little thing here is, the rectangle thing. A little bit closer. I don't know what that is. Some kind of pole. Uh, yeah, it kind of adds an interesting element. I don't know. It's almost maybe a little. I actually thought it was a glitch in the RAW at first, like a corrupted RAW. But yeah, I don't know. I'm 50-50. Half of me kind of wants to just get rid of it, maybe just like clone it out so then it doesn't grab your attention. But I mean, maybe it's something that's relevant to this spot, so probably could be worth leaving in as well. So we're moving along, and wow, we've got another epic slabby looking wave. I wonder if this is the same spot. Rocks look pretty similar. Maybe all three of these waves are in the same spot. Maybe Norway's only got one wave and this is it. Whatever it is, it's pretty epic. But yeah, this is a really cool lineup. Super moody. So this is the, what do we got here? This is the RAW, and then this is Chris's edit. So again, he's been light-handed on the edit, which is nice. It's really epic how it's got this little bit of stormy weather, bit of color in the sky. I like it. Looks like Chris has darkened up the sky a little bit, so that's really cool. We sort of accentuated that. I would probably maybe push the color a little bit in the sky to sort of accentuate that slightly. So, I mean, there's a couple of ways you could do that. You can go down to the HSL panel, which stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. So you can go into saturation. If you click on this little dot here, which says adjust saturation by dragging in the photo, you click that, that activates it. And then you go to the color that you want to sort of accentuate. So this little sort of yellowy orange. And then we click down, and then as we move the mouse up, you can see the orange and yellow sliders they're moving up, and then it's making that more and more saturated orange yellow. So we're just going super over the top just so you can kind of see what's going on. And then if you move your mouse down, then that takes it away. So the orange is kind of turned into black and white. So if you go back to where it was, we'll go back again, click, hold the mouse, and then we just bring that up a little bit, just till we sort of feel like we're getting a little bit more of that orange going on. That looks pretty nice. So difference we made there was from that to that. It's pretty subtle, but I feel like it's just added that little bit of extra color there. And then another way you could do it would be just to get the graduated filter again. Warm up so we double click on effect, so that zeroes everything out. Then if we warm it up a little bit with the temperature, so if we go an extra 10 towards the yellow, and then we drag our graduated filter down, then that's just sort of adding that little bit of extra yellow tinge to the sky as well. And then the longer you make the graduation, the softer the filter will be as it sort of comes down across the image. So say if you wanted to do something just to the sky and not to everything else, you might make it super small and then have it on the horizon line. And then say if you crank that right up, then your sky's yellow and your water's still blue. It usually looks a little bit more natural just to have a little bit of a bigger gradient, and then just use like a subtle amount of temperature. So if we have a quick look there, what we've done, so yeah, we've just kind of boosted what's going on in the sky there. It still looks nice and natural, but yeah, it's just maybe accentuated a little bit. But yeah, everything else I really like what Chris has done with the edit. His composition's nice. I mean, you could go full photo nerd and just put it on the thirds line. Just so if you send it into one of those guys that's like super nerdy about photography, when he drew his lines over it, he'd be really happy. And then there's a bit of room to crop, so it's kind of nice. It's just making everything, like the wave a little bit bigger. So maybe we just crop like that. But as you can see, I don't really do a whole heap across his image. I think, yeah, I like his little, like a slabby vibe he's got going on from Norway, and his edit's really nice. So he's done well. Thanks for sending those in, Chris. So we'll move along to Nathan's photos. So Nathan sent in his RAWs and his JPEGs as well. So yeah, again, he's a sort of pretty light-handed on the edits, which is nice. So this is Nathan's RAW. That's his edit. So one thing I sort of find when it comes to sunrise or sunset photos is your camera, if your white balance is on auto, so where we go, if we have a look at the white balance, then you'll find that the camera is sort of seeing so much yellow in the sky that it's making things quite blue. And then where your wave is ends up maybe like a little bluer than what it was in real life, which generally is, when it comes to water, having a blue sort of colored wave is, yeah, not a bad thing. So that's not a drama, but I can kind of see here Nathan's edit here is, it's ended up like a little bit like purpley sort of looking almost in the whitewash. So an easy way to get like a real natural looking wave is to get your eyedropper tool. So that's just this little eyedropper here up the top, just above the temperature. So you click on that, then you go across. Now, generally, like the whitewash in a wave photo should be pretty neutral. It should be like pretty white. So if we click on the whitewash, then that gives us a little bit more of a, like an overall feel of what it was like actually when you were there. And then if you're doing like a sunrise sort of sunset image, adding more yellow to an image is just kind of like going to help accentuate that. So I'd probably bring that down a little bit, bring it back, but yeah, just sort of bring it back until it looks a little bit more neutral on the whitewash. What's happened there is we've sort of lost the blueness of the wave, but I feel like generally like sunrise, sunset, it's kind of nice to have that greeny, yellowy sort of a tinge going on. Composition on this is really cool. Love how he's got this little bit of grass foreground. It's really given you, like the vibe of what it's like to be running down to the beach that day on, for your early surf and seeing these fun little waves reeling off. So yeah, it's really cool having that extra sort of element in there. I'd probably add a little bit more contrast to this. I feel like it could be a little more poppy. And then we can maybe have a little look at the blacks as well. So add a little bit more blacks in there. And then we'll have a little look at the whites as well. So same thing, I'm just holding down Option, pushing the whites. Often I don't push until I see things overexposing. I'll just like push it up and then I'll have a quick look and be happy with that. Maybe bring the shadows up a little bit. So looking at the crop. Yeah, the crop's pretty nice. So I mean, that was Nathan's original file, and then that was just what we sort of fiddled with. But I mean, it is just a personal taste. Like a lot of people like the wave to look blue, and that's cool. I just feel like if it's a sort of a warm sunrise vibe, then just having that overall look on the image looks quite nice. So that's why I sort of go down that route. So we're moving right along. So we've got this really cool shot here. I love the composition. With the rocks. So this is Nathan's RAW, and then this is his edited file. So there's a real nice clean edit. Yeah, it's looks like he's just like added a little bit of extra contrast in there, pumped up the colors slightly. Nothing sort of looks too over the top. Just one thing I'd probably look out for is the if you're pumping your colors using the saturation slider, just like say if we we'll just do a real quick edit on Nathan's image just to kind of get it blacks, just so we can sort of demonstrate what happens. We'll do a crop. So I have this, I have these key commands for Lightroom. I got a program, it's called pFixer. They make these all crazy little gizmos that you use instead of your keyboard, and it has like all these dials and like switches and stuff like that. I can't really be bothered with that because I already have a keyboard on my desk. My desk is way too messy, so the last thing I need is another gizmo. But you can buy, from pFixer, you can buy a keyboard mapping. So for Lightroom, so you can assign different commands, pretty much any command that's like any of these sliders here. You can add those to your keyboard. So for example, exposure, I have set to F. So right now I'm just tapping F on my keyboard and you can see the exposure is going up. And then I have like on R is temperature. So if I want to make things like warmer, I just tap that, and then E, temperature comes down. So what happens, I probably wouldn't really use it a whole heap for like surf imagery, but if I was editing something like a wedding where you're just like doing 700 images at once, the last thing you want to do is be moving your mouse like to slider to slider. If you can just like tap different keys. Generally, I'll just be like tapping keys and then tapping the arrow key to go to the next image. So one thing that I have set up for those key commands is if I hit number 3, it straightens the horizon. So if we hit 3, it's done a little crop there, and you can see it's just done a real faint like slight angle correction, but it's like straightened that horizon nicely. So that's a real easy way to do it. I actually can't even remember what the command is to do it outside of the key commands because I've had it like that for so long. But yeah, that's a way you can do that. So I like how he's cropped down a little bit, and he's gone 100% the thirds route, which is really cool. He's got his surfer right in the middle. I probably, if I'm looking at someone that's surfing on a wave, so if we do the same thing, so we come down to thirds like that. I like to have a little bit more room, if possible, in front of the surfer. So I don't really want to see so much where he's been. I want to see where he's going. So, I mean, there's not really a lot of room on the right to move there anyway. So, but yeah, I feel like if it has a little bit more breathing room where he's headed for some reason, that makes me feel better about the image. So I took a long way to get there, but what I was going to talk about was I feel like if you just use the saturation slider, which I feel like maybe is what Nathan has done, you'll see the surfer's skin has ended up quite full on. It's sort of a bit reddy, a bit orangey. So rather than use that saturation slider, you could go back to that HSL panel, click on saturation, and then click on the colors that you want to accentuate. So we just click on the wave, and you can see it's just moving up the blue and the aqua. So that way, what that's doing is we can go super wild, get as blue as you want, but then the surfer's skin isn't changing at all. So you're not really affecting that. So yeah, that can be a nicer way of doing it, just sort of getting in there and being a bit more specific about what you want to sort of boost up a little bit. So if we boost up the blue there like that, then if you wanted to do the color of the rocks, for example, you just click on the rock and you boost that, and that's the yellow and the orange. That might actually be affecting his skin though, so maybe that's not ideal. But then another thing that you can do, say if you got to this point like in Nathan's image here, where you're like, oh crap, like I've gone a bit wild on my saturation, and my surfer's, his skin's like a little bit orangey, reddy, glowy. You could just click on the saturation again, click on what you're a little bit concerned about. So this is his red hand here, and then just drag that down. So that's bringing the red and the orange, which is generally your skin tones. So we'll bring those down a little bit. Yeah, then that's like a little bit more natural looking skin tones. But yeah, all around, really really cool image. So he's at 300 mil, 320 ISO, f9. Yeah, sometimes it's kind of cool to drop the aperture like a little bit lower and get these rocks in the foreground like a little bit softer. But yeah, I mean, that's just sort of personal sort of taste. It looks good either way. Right, so moving along to his next one, we got this really cool slow shutter lines image coming in. So these are swell lines marching in by the looks, and looks like Nathan's quite high up, and so he's got like a really good view of the swell coming in. What have we shot this at? So 176 f22, 1/8 of a second in ISO 100. So often for these slow shutter photos, to keep the shutter open long enough to get that motion blur, yeah, you have to crank your aperture to the max, which he has, and then have your ISO as low as possible. Some cameras can actually go to ISO 50. I know on my Sony cameras, if I'm using auto ISO, I want to go to 100, but if I set the ISO on manual, we can get ISO 50, and then that'll sort of, you know, that's half the amount of light that's going to be coming on in. So, but it's, yeah, often cameras these days are awesome, especially if you're shot at 100 ISO. It's pretty easy to bring that information back. So we're going to do a quick edit on this. I bring the exposure back, and because anything that's shot on at f22, if you've got any tiny little bits of dust on your sensor, they're going to show up in your images. So like this little guy here, it's pretty much unavoidable. They're pretty easy to remove. We'll go and remove them once we get to the end. So yeah, first thing I'll do would bring, so we've brought the exposure like 2 full stops down, and we haven't lost anything, which is amazing. So it's nice to still have that info in the raw file. So this is why you shoot a raw photo. If you shot this as a JPEG and you're starting with this, you would have sort of no chance of recovering any of this information there, whereas the raw file, you can sort of recover it nice and easy. So slow shutters always seem to need like a little bit of extra contrast, so we'll crank some contrast. And then because we've got these like really cool lines coming in, I would bring in a lot of blacks. So we're going to move that. Still can't see any blacks, anything. We haven't lost any black information. There we go, starting to. So that's probably a little bit too far. No, because we've added some extra contrast. Oh, so much contrast to this. The colors have gone pretty wild. It's gone like really, really saturated. It's super aqua looking. So it's gone green now, so blue. So in this instance, I'd probably actually just bring the saturation down until I started to get comfortable with like it looking more lifelike. So that's looking a little bit more legit, which is quite a lot. That's minus 40% saturation because we added so much contrast. So another thing that you can do in the HSL panel is with the hue. So if you click on hue, same thing like we did with saturation, click on the blue here, and then if you move it up, you'll see the blues start going a little bit more purple. And then if you move it down, you can see the blues start going a little bit more green. I feel like these blues are slightly greeny, so if we go slightly up a little bit. Uh-oh, I think I've lost me. I lost my webcam. Give me. All right, we're back. So sorry about the amateur hour. Let's zoom that guy. What's going on? There we go. It's a bit close. Nice. All right, sorry about that. Amateur guy. It's better right now. Right on. So yeah, with the hue, you can click on that, move it up a little bit, and then that just kind of gives it more of like a neutral sort of blue, I feel. So it's still pretty saturated, so I'd maybe even bring that saturation down even more. Yeah, I feel like that's looking pretty realistic. So one thing, so Nathan's done like a really good job of the slow shutter pan to get these waves sort of this blur going on across the swell lines. But what happens is generally if you're to see the swell lines like that, you kind of need to be like a little bit higher, a little bit elevated. And then because your tripod's pointing down, if it's right in the middle of your pan, your lines will be straight. But if it's slightly to the right or slightly to the left of when you're in your pan, you sort of end up with the waves having this little bit of like an angle on them. So one thing you could do, if you go down to the transform panel and you click on guided, now if you hold down and drag across, you'll add a guide. So what we're doing here is at the top, the lines are pretty straight. So we're just going to do like a straight line. And that's our first guide. And then if we run a guide along this swell line at the bottom, which is like a little bit crooked. Now what Lightroom's going to do is automatically it's going to correct everything. So what it does is it makes anything that's on the guides, it makes them square. So if we look at it now, now the lines are like really nice and square. So that way you've got like a little bit more of a, like an actual what it will look like when you're there, rather than sort of having that slightly off from your pan. And then I'd crop that up a little bit so there's a little bit less for that first line. And then when it comes to things like these dust spots, you can see there's like a couple of dust spots there. What you can do is if you hit the spot removal tool, I think we call it. Spot removal, that's the one. Click on that. And then you can either click a dot over what you want like this. And then the AI will try and match up exactly, where it's going to be to get rid of that dot. So we click done. You can see it's done a really, really good job there. You can't even tell that there was a dot. So one really cool thing I just learned recently, so we'll find another dot there, is sometimes the AI on the spot removal doesn't do that great a job of picking up picking up sort of what's going to be a good match. So here we'll click on the dot. It's done a really good match here because it's obviously like horizontal lines, so it's pretty easy for it to be like, okay, that's going to match up. But sometimes you might get it and it might end up like this, and then you look at it and you're like, oh my gosh, that looks terrible. What you can do is the / key on your keyboard. If you hit that, it just has another go at finding a new spot. You can actually keep hitting it and it'll keep like trying different spots for you, or you can just grab the spot where it's ended up and you can manually move it yourself until somewhere that you're happy. So, but yeah, clicking the little / key is quite fun. Make the AI do the work rather than you. So yeah, then you want to go around and clean up as many of these dots as you could. There's not really a whole heap you can do about this. If you're shooting at f/22, you're going to end up with any tiny little particle of dust on your sensor is going to end up as a dot. Obviously, cleaning your sensor often could help eliminate that. But yeah, if I shot at f/22, mine would probably look a lot worse than that. But yeah, all up, really, really cool image. So if we have a look at our edit there, compared to Nathan's, that's Nathan's one, and then what we've got going on there. But yeah, it's really, really cool shot. It's done well. So we're moving along now to Tim. So Tim sent in 3 cool images, 3 quite different images to each other. I only got the JPEGs there, so I can't really do too much on the post-processing sort of vibe, but we can have a good look at areas we could maybe change up. So this is a cool sort of low aperture sort of feeling detail of like a little wave breaking. One thing I sort of find that if you're shooting low aperture, it needs to be quite obvious when you look at the image what's in focus. And then I find it a little bit frustrating if I look at an image and I have to hunt with my eye to see what's in focus. And as a rule of thumb, it sort of looks most natural when what's closer to the camera is in focus, and then the focus drops off. So say if something in this bottom part of the wave here, like in the bottom third, was in focus, and then everything sort of dropped off, and it'll be like easier for your eye to pick up what's in focus, because it's going to be real obvious. It's right there in front of you, and then it'll feel like a little bit more natural because what's in the front will be in focus, and then things will drop off super nice in the background. If you're shooting like little water details like this, it's quite hit and miss. You know what you're going to get in focus. You just have to keep firing off. In this instance, I would say probably just adding, putting the focal point like a little bit lower in the frame. That could sort of up the chance of being able to, you know, get that middle bit in focus for sure. But yeah, really cool little water detail. So I like that. So we'll move along to the next one. This is a cool shot. I like it. Really nice with the foreground. Super sort of soft foreground, but you get the vibe of what's going on there. You can see the foliage in the front. With a shot like this, I will generally crop. I will shoot like a little bit wider if I'm shooting like through some foreground, to allow myself like a little bit of room later on to crop a little bit for composition. So with foreground elements, you want to have enough there so you can see them, but I find if you crop in, say for this one, if we cropped in and we got super nerdy about it and we went on the third, it's just going to make like the main part of your image, the surfer, which is what you sort of want everyone to see, like a little bit bigger, and you're still getting just as much of a vibe going on from the foreground, but it can just appreciate a crop. I always find that if we're doing that sort of thirds kind of vibe, I always find that if you put the horizon line right on the thirds, for some reason the sky doesn't feel like it has enough. I always try and put that like a little bit more sky on the third, and then that way it seems to look a little bit more natural. I don't know why that is, but yeah, always is the way. Yeah, other than that, really cool shot. It could maybe benefit like by being a little bit more punchy, maybe like throw a little bit more contrast in there. And maybe throw a little bit more blacks at it as well. I feel like overall it's got a slight sort of purpley tinge. And then this is just a JPEG, so it's not as easy to correct on a JPEG as it would be with a RAW. But again, if it's sort of a little bit purple, that's generally from having like a bit much magenta in the tint. So if you go up to the little white balance here, and then you just bring that across a little bit in the direction of the green, then yeah, that sort of eliminates that. And then the photo benefits as well, because it just sort of makes a little bit more green on the wave. So if we went even more, yeah, and then it looks a little bit more neutral. So that was before, and then that's after. So yeah, I feel like that looks like slightly more natural, a little bit more neutral than maybe it would. And then I'd be inclined to sort of accentuate that green there. You could bring up the saturation overall like that. That is making these plants like a little bit intense. So the plants are already quite bright. So what you could do would be just get this adjustment brush up the top here. Again, we double click on effect to zero that out. And then say if we wanted to add a little bit of extra saturation, we'd put that up. And then we click off auto mask, and then we want sort of like kind of a biggish brush here. So you can either adjust your brush size right here in the panel, or if you just like, I just move up and down with my mouse and that adjusts the size of the brush. And then if you're ever painting in something like this, you want to have the feather and flow like as high as you can. So that way you're going to get like a nice soft sort of brush. And then I just brush like a little bit of extra saturation on the wave there, just a touch. So if you click now, if you have that brush selected, if you click on the O on your keyboard, what that does is it brings up, it shows you where you've brushed. And so you click that off, and then if you keep moving the saturation, you can actually put quite a lot in there and it still looks really natural. So somewhere around there looks cool. And then if you want to see what it was like without it, then you can turn off the brush adjustments down on this little switch down the bottom there. So you flick that off, flick that back on. So it wasn't a big difference, just like a subtle little difference there. So if we look before and after of Tom's image, so that's the before there, and that's the after. Didn't do anything too wild, but one thing actually you don't see in the before and after is the crop. So if we reset it, then you'll see the crop there. That's the one. Right, so then we go to Nathan's next image, which is really, really cool. Amazing sunrise water shot. It's done really well here. He's probably not in New Zealand where I live, because it's just about impossible. The sun's so bright here, it's just about impossible to have it really nicely exposed like that and then still see any detail of the water. So yeah, he's done a real good job there of balancing exposure. Edit looks really cool. Water's nice and silky. They'll make a great print. I quite like it off to the side. I'm not sure. I can't work out if I'd like it more if it was in the middle or off to the side, but yeah, either way works really well. As far as what we could do, I quite like it if there's some sort of there's not really any color in the water, so it's pretty hard to get color in the water when you're at sunrise like that. So often I would just add like a little bit of extra black into that, so it just makes it even slightly more dramatic. So rather than having that sort of gray sort of tinge like there, if it's like full black, it looks cool. Or another thing that you could do would be, you can just add a little graduated filter and bring the exposure down from the bottom. So then that way you'll have something that's like quite dark, and then it's sort of accentuating that little like glint of water which is on the getting that sun glint there. I'd probably do that and add like a little bit of black, bringing it in. Yeah, maybe something like that. So that was before. And then up top sort of ended up like a little bit sort of bluey greeny, which is cool. Again, we could have a little play with that. So if it's a bit green, so green's like sort of an odd color, I guess, that you probably wouldn't have in that scene. So if it was a little bit green, we could again just add with a tint, add a little bit more red. Bring that down. And then again, if we had the raw, it'll probably work a little bit better, but we'll just give this a go, see how it works. Yeah, it's sort of. But yeah, I mean, all up, it's a really epic image he's done. He's done well. I really like it. So nice work from Tim. And then we'll move along to Tom. So Tom sent in 3 really cool shots, a couple of epic slow shutters. So that's the raw of his slow shutter. That's his edit. I feel like he's nailed the slow shutter. So this is shot at 200mm looks a little bit elevated, so I'm guessing he's maybe sort of on some rocks looking down at the wave. Yeah, really, he's done well as far as like matching the pace of the wave with his pan. He's at 1/20th of a second, f8, ISO 100 at 200 mil. So that one, yeah, it must have been shot quite early in the morning when there wasn't a whole heap of light. He hasn't had to push his aperture too high or anything. Maybe if he pushed his aperture a little bit higher, though, he probably would have got a little bit, a slightly more evenly sort of balanced image. So maybe if it was like at f11, yeah, then everything sort of would have been a little bit. But he's managed to pull it back okay there. But I feel like there's still quite a lot of the whites info that's missing up here. So I would probably bring that back quite a lot more. So generally, if I'm doing an edit like this, I'll start with the exposure and I'll bring that back to about where I think that needs to be. So there you can see everything. You can sort of see everything in the shot. Nothing's been lost. And from there, you can then you can sort of tweak it to make it look how you want it to look. So again, slow shutters always seem to need blacks. So put some blacks in. It's looking cool. And then the whites, what we'll do, we'll push the whites up until they get close to blowing out. Yeah, about there. We've sort of still lost a little bit at the top, so we'll maybe just bring that back with the highlights slider. Slow shutters always appreciate a little bit of contrast, it seems. And then I'd probably get in there with the brush, adjustment brush, and so double click on the effect to zero that out. Maybe bring the exposure down a little bit. I'm going to do -0.2. Bring the highlights down a little bit. Let's go -0.2, -10. And then we're just going to brush in. Well, you can see that info coming back nicely. So we're just going to brush in anything that's sort of been affected and that it looks like we've lost. Nice, it's looking good. And then the bottom half of the wave here, that's ended up sort of quite bright as well. So we could just do that easily with a graduated filter. So we zero out that effect. Actually, I probably could have skipped the same effect then because I'm pretty much going to do the same thing. So we'll go about -2.0 or -0.2 and bring the highlights down about 10. And then we'll just bring that across, and that's just going to even things up a little bit as well. So if we click this little light switch, you can see the difference there. Just sort of balance that exposure a little bit. From there, I feel like I could probably actually bring the exposure up a little bit. So I'd probably just bring it up with my eye until we feel like we're starting to lose things. Yeah. And there's some really cool colors in this image. So yeah, Tom's done a good job. He's got up either early or stayed out late for that sort of sunrise, sunset vibe. So I mean, there's a couple of options you could do here. You could either accentuate the blue, bring that blue down, or you could accentuate the yellow. I just don't really mind it as shot. Or there's other ways you could do that. You could go into the shadows and the highlights. So the highlights is all sort of the yellow zone. So in the highlights, if you push that right up, you can see kind of what that's affecting. And I find a good way to sort of get your shadows and highlights is get them nailed is to go super wild on them to start with, so you can see what you're doing, and then you bring this across, and we want to warm that up, kind of a yellowy sort of a vibe about there. So that's at 31, 32, around there, looks good. And then I will bring that back until it looks natural. So out there. And then we can do with the shadows, we can add a little bit of extra blues into the shadows. So let's bring that across to it, start getting blue. It looks pretty good. So that's at 211, so that's 100%. And then we just bring that back down to it starts looking natural again. That's looking nice. So if we want to see what difference the shadow, the split toning made with the shadow and highlights, we just switch that switch. That's what it was. It's just like a subtle difference there. A little bit warmer still, but you're still retaining that sort of blue zone in the shadows. A little bit warmer in the highlights. But yeah, all up, yeah, it's a really cool image. I like what he's done there. So we're moving along, and this is Tom's edit, and this is his raw, and that is one heck of a perfect wave. That's amazing shape wave. Really like this shot. The other thing I really like about it is that I love sort of timeless shot. So this bottom turn shot, I think, is something that's timeless. It's something that, you know, could have been taken 20 years ago, could have been taken today. I feel something like that's gonna, you know, it's gonna be relevant forever. Something that's like a timeless sort of shot like that. The edit he's done is really cool. Sort of done interesting crop, more like a 16:9 style crop. Which is cool. You know, like it would, so if you're looking at it on your iPhone and you put your iPhone sideways, it would fit on there perfectly. But I feel the crop has left like just this real small amount of sky, which is maybe a little bit distracting. And then there's still like a little bit of whitewash in the front. So I won't really go into the edit here because I think Tom's edit's really cool. So, but we'll just look at just look at a crop. So, say if we were going to go 16:9. So this is probably about how Tom had it cropped. But I feel like if you just went down just to the bottom of that whitewash, and then just put it in a teeny little bit like that. Get rid of that sky. Like I feel like a crop like that without the sky in it is like a little bit less distracting. Obviously, Tom's edit is far superior to the raw, but yeah, all up is a really cool shot. Couple of things. I quite like to have like a little bit of context in land images. So maybe like a bit of foreground, a little bit of background, just to sort of give you a bit more of a feeling like, you know, is a rocky beach, is a sandy beach, is there lots of people hanging out, or, you know, is there a cool headland in the background? But then sometimes you have an instance like this where the wave's so perfect that I feel like the, you know, the wave with no distractions in it is great as it is as well. So yeah, not a big deal not to have it on its own for sure. So if we have a look at the settings here, we're on ISO 360, 420mm f8 and 1/3200th of a second. So I feel like Tom maybe could have been a little bit more economical with his settings here. So if you're shooting from the land, 1,000th of a second is fine. Sort of maybe you might go to 1,500th of a second, but anything that's faster than that, you're not going to see any difference because that's 1,000th of a second, or maybe 1,500th of a second if you're going all in, is going to be enough to be able to get like a real nice crisp shot and freeze the action. Because you're quite far away from the action and things aren't moving that quickly through the frame. So you can get a really crisp shot like that. And so there's not really anything gained by going from 1/1500th of a second to 1/3200th of a second. It's like double the shutter speed, but there's not anything to be gained by that. But although the ISO is quite low at 360, that ISO could be halved by halving the shutter speed. So I feel like this image probably could have been shot at 100 ISO. So generally ISO, the higher the ISO, sort of the more grainy the image is. And this image doesn't look like it has grain in it at all. So it's not a big deal. It's like it's a nice, that's 100% there. It's a super nice, clean image. But one thing a lot of people don't really think about is that the lower your ISO as well, the more dynamic range there is in your image. So what that means is if you wanted to pull information out of the shadows, or if you wanted to pull information out of the highlights, the lower your ISO, the more information there is going to be there. So we've got some, it's obviously super, super bright. We've got some quite blown out info here on the wave face, and then it's quite dark in the shadows, which works really well. Looks cool with the contrast. But yeah, maybe if it was shot at 100 ISO, you might have a chance at getting a little bit more detail out of those zones. So yeah, I would try and be like a little bit more economical with settings, and just maybe be a bit more aware of if you're pumping things right up, you know, what are you gaining from that? And maybe you might be able to gain something through something else in your exposure triangle, I guess. But yeah, I've got to give a shout out to the shape of this shadow. The lip and the shadow looks so cool. Really, really cool. Wish I was there this day. It looks epic. Then we're moving on to Tom's last image, which is actually the last image of the set, and he's got another really cool slow shutter. So we've got this girl perched on the nose. This is his raw, and then Tom's done a black and white edit, which is really cool. Yeah, like he's done well with the shot. 1/15 of a second, 5.6 ISO, 250. Yeah, so I mean, everything that he's got here in his settings is looking spot on. So that's cool. One thing that I quite like about this image is it's obviously been shot like pre-sunrise or post-sunset, but there's a bit of color in the sky, and I feel like it's maybe a little bit of a shame to go and strip that away. So I think we could maybe we'll have a little fiddle with it and see how we look. So we're going to give that a straighten. About there, looks good. So I won't use that the auto straighten function on this for the horizon, because the horizon is actually not super flat. It's kind of got this wobble through it. So I think the auto, we'll give it a go, see what happens. 3, auto crop. Yeah, no, did it. Auto crop did it. Nice. Oh yeah, I guess it has got that straight hairline there. So the auto crop found its zone, so that's awesome. So one thing with the auto crop is you can move around within that. So I'll probably move it back a little bit there. It's really cool. Like everything's on the thirds here, which is awesome. The wave line, the horizon line is really cool. So from there, something like this, I would start with the exposure. So because you're editing a raw file, it's like non-destructive. So if you bring the exposure up like this overall in the image, you can bring the exposure back down in other areas of the image, say with graduated filters, and you haven't done any damage, or so I quite like to get the overall look of the exposure, like out there looks pretty good. From there, I would, again, slow shutters always seem to want to benefit from some contrast, so we'll put that in there. Yeah, that's looking good. So you got some blacks. Throw some whites at it. So there's actually really nice color on the wave as well. So might even bring that exposure up a little bit. So I'm kind of disregarding what's going on the top half of the wave because we're going to work on that a little bit later. I'm just sort of making sure that everything in the bottom of the wave is like nicely exposed. So at the top and behind, you can see we've lost like a little bit of the color and a bit of information, but the highlight recovery should bring that back. So we'll bring that in. It's looking good. And then we'll do a little graduated filter from the top. So you can see there's like that faint sort of hint of like warmish sky there, but it's a little bit blown out. So if we bring the exposure down, let's go 0.21, and we'll bring the highlights down, maybe -10. And we're going to be cheeky and add a little bit of extra warmth to that sky. So we'll bring the temperature up, bring that up about 10. So you can do this before you drag your graduated filter down, or you can adjust it after. I kind of like to do it before and see how I got on. So we'll bring that down. Oh yeah, that's looking nice. And then we might want to do some sort of spot saturation increases. So the wave's nice and blue, so we're going to accentuate that a little bit, push that up slightly. And then we might want to push that color of the sky a little bit as well. And then the cool thing about those graduated filters is you can go back later, click on it, select it again, and then if you're like, oh, I actually want to see that a little bit warmer, then you can adjust also. See, I feel like that's looking pretty cool. So that was before, that's what we got out of it after. And then that is Tom's black and white edit, which I still really love as well. So yeah, it's a really cool shot. And I think everyone's photos they sent in were really awesome. Enjoyed having a little fiddle with them, and I hope that you found some of my feedback valuable. So yeah, like I was saying earlier, if you want to get in on these image review things, potentially I'll do another one. So just keep an eye on the Sony Scene website, and that's the place to check it out and to sign up. And thanks for everyone for tuning in, and thanks for the guys for sending in photos. Unreal.